everyone. This should be a fun time. We've got a special guest with us, evangdabbs, who specializes in UX design. You might be wondering, what is UX design? What does that even look like? Well, luckily for you, you're here and you get to check out this video where he's going to break it all down for you. And technology comes growing pains. This is the first time I've done a first time I've done a vlog, which means something wrong was bound to happen. In this case, we don't have both of our faces on the screen. So you're going to see Evan the entire time, which is exciting for me because he's our guest, and I think that he should get the full attention in this episode. I'm sure this will actually be really beneficial to a lot of people right now that are considering changing careers and in teaching in particular, because both you and I have come from the public education system as both professionals and have made a transition now to the other side, doing things beyond the classroom. So I know we came up with a list of questions to ask each other, and we'll pull from that, and I'm sure as things kind of progress organically, we'll go from there.
Yeah, man. Sounds great.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay, so yeah, you want to start talking about what it is you're doing these days and how you got out of education?
Yeah. So my story is one that started back in 2018, and I was following a friend that had started a blog at the time, and his name's Bobby Hoyt, and he is the owner and founder of what is known as Millennial Money Man. And the Millennial Money Man blog was exactly what it sounded like. He's a millennial. He talked about money, and that was it, right?
Yeah.
At the time, he was still teaching, and we knew each other through a drum corps at the time with the Cavaliers, and he was teaching for a summer and kind of filling in, helping out while I was a student. So he's just a couple years removed from when I was a member there. And he was teaching down in the Houston area at the time, and I remember following his blog and following his post because his big thing was crushing his student debt and trying to get rid of that. And he documented everything he was doing for that very reason, to help him get out of student loan debt, because he started to realize how much of a pain in the butt that was going to be, and where he wanted to be in his life. And along the way, if I remember correctly, and if he ever watches this or somebody sees this, you can still look this up and verify. But I know he and his now business partner were high school friends, and they joined together and created a course teaching people how to not only make money creating their own blogs, but also running Facebook advertising for small businesses. And I'm going to jump into the Facebook advertising thing because that's actually where I made my leap from teaching into what I do now. So at the time, I believe Bobby was talking to a local jeweler in Houston at the time with his now wife, but then he was shopping for an engagement ring, and the conversation came up of social media with the small family-owned jeweler, and noticed that they didn't have a lot of attention or attraction or a lot of information or engagement on their socials. And so that's where he was explaining to them about Facebook advertising and how you could target people, and you can send them advertisements that you want them to see. And one thing led to another, and by the end of the conversation, the jeweler had asked him, well, that's cool, how much do you charge for running that every month? And just threw out a number and was like, cool, $1,000 a month. And they're like, okay, let's do it. And they totally bought it because they could see the value in what it is you're doing, and that's how I got started. So with his background being in education, kind of put the creative blocks together and realized there's a lot of potential for teaching more people how to do this, and so created a course that you can now purchase through their company and through their website, which is Laptop Empires. So you can go check that out on Google if you want to. and I took
We'll
that
have a
course.
link here in the description,
Yeah.
right? Is that
Yeah,
how
of
we're
course.
supposed to do that? Yeah,
That's how we do this. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. I'm so glad
right.
you did it that way because I'm totally screwed if it's actually over here. But we'll figure it out.
We'll figure that out in post.
Yeah.
Yeah, this
Maybe
is
that'll be like the shtick with this whole thing is like it's
yeah.
just totally wrong. Everything we do is just
It's
backwards.
all going to be probably, and that's all a growth mindset, which is what we're all about here as former teachers, current teachers, whatever.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Uh,
absolutely.
so I ended up taking this course and I learned a lot from it and uh, you know went ahead and created my own agency, did the paperwork, and all this was going on while I was still teaching, right?
Right.
And I was just trying to figure out like something to make extra money at the time because I had student loans I had to pay myself, so I had to take care of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
And this seemed like not necessarily easy, but it means sorry, it seemed like a more tangible way to still keep my full time job and have this thing running that as long as I'm updating it, making small changes here and there, it's not going to take me the same amount of bandwidth as being a full-time band director or full-time percussion instructor in the state
Yeah.
of Texas,
Yeah. That's a whole other level of bandwidth, right? To
Yeah,
deal with. Sure.
it's just craziness. So that's how I got started, and it wasn't until in 2021, or let me back up, in 2020, when the pandemic hit, a lot of people were struggling to figure out what to do next, and a lot of small businesses were struggling because most places were brick and mortar stores at the time. Maybe they had a website that was set up, but it wasn't creative. It wasn't in a way to where we needed people that knew how to create a funnel or an experience when they come to a page, or a shopping experience online that was simple and simplified and easy to like ship everything. So that was a tough time for people, and for what I did, it was actually a great time. Somebody that was also teaching and wanted to get out got the real estate's license in July of 2020, reached out to me, and we partnered up, and I helped them. And of course, real estate was hot in the fall of 2020, and it's still going, so it was crazy. So that was a good time because we were seeing really good results, getting really cheap leads for running these advertisements, and help them with their life, and was able to help them quit their job teaching, and they left I think in the middle of the fall of 2020, and then they moved their whole family and moved to a different part of the state where they're much happier, and now he's off doing some really awesome investment stuff, and I'm actually going to have him do one of these with me too, so he can talk about all
Yeah.
his flip and fix and flip and holds that he's doing, because it's pretty neat. So
How does that
that
add in
helped.
the HGTV show? The flipping and the holding and the whatever. That should be the thing, right?
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
That's the thing.
Yeah.
So that's how that got started, and it just started to build traction. I set my own fees. I set my own referral fees for people so that I could work with anybody and everybody that was interested in having an extra hand on marketing online for them. And
Yeah.
that's pretty much how I got into it, and that's what I do now. What about
And
you? Go
that's
ahead.
so cool. Sorry, I'm just take apart that for a minute because I think it's so cool because like I think a couple weeks back, one of our friends posted a picture of us from TCU days. Like I think maybe your freshman year when like we had first met or whatever, and that picture just blew my mind because I was like, wow, if I had to go back to explain to that young starry-eyed kid, right, like what we're doing now, like what do you mean, like no, see, all you're really going to do is you skim this little bit off of every ad revenue on Facebook. Like that concept itself, even in 2008 or whatever, would have been so weird that you could like make a very comfortable living off of, right?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
like what would you go tell your 18-year-old self? Like how would you?
Yeah, I think in the question that you sent me, it was, what would I tell that 18-year-old self? And then it was also, I think it had something to do with would it have changed my perspective on being a musician?
Yeah, right, and
Um,
like what? Yeah, something like
yeah.
that. I think. Sorry, crazy.
Well, I think anytime someone's, well, first of all, when you're 18, you don't know anything. Like you're an idiot. It's the worst time of your life
Yeah,
because, at least right now, it's the worst time of your life where people are telling you to pursue your dreams and to go to college and to do all these things, and you just don't have enough time to digest and figure out what you really want to do. I mean, you get outliers, people that do know what they want to do and they go into it, right? So you kind of think of it as, well, what is it I'm enjoying now? And for me at that time, I was thinking, the world will always need teachers, which I still think is a true statement.
Yeah.
Regardless of what has happened in the past 2 years in particular, and definitely need them now more than ever. But at that time, it was okay. World's always going to need teachers, and if I'm going to be a teacher, I might as well, do something that I really enjoy. And at that time, I think I really felt like music was part of my personality and not something that was a hobby and something that I could tap into from a creative standpoint. And I would have told that 18-year-old self to find something else that pays the bills and is pretty generic, or something that is suitable to technology, because of how much it was, it was impressed upon us, like how much technology was going to change, and we knew that, and we were living it every day with our phones, because the iPhone was, however many years old at that point,
Yeah.
when we were in college. And so it was obvious that that was going to happen. But in answering the question about how has it changed musicianship, I feel now more than ever that music is it's something I enjoy on the side. It's something that I'll continue to keep doing, whether it's teaching or performing, but it's not my personality. And that was a really hard thing. And I think that that's what I was missing throughout my years of teaching, was understanding that the reason I was miserable with it was I was consumed by it constantly, and it was no longer enjoyable. It was part of my personality,
I think that you touched on something that I think is really smart, because like as you're an 18-year-old, well, you're still figuring out who you are, right? And so you say, well, I know music is part of my identity or whatever, but as you get older, you kind of figure out that you can kind of grow beyond only this thing, right? And so I think the people who are like about it, like that is their identity, and maybe they have a few other hobbies, but like still the core of who they consider themselves to be is this music thing and this music education thing. But as you and I have kind of grown and like maybe kind of figured out that like, yes, and I also have these other things that are interesting and that are cool and that like, I'm interested in exploring. I certainly feel that way, like kind of for where I ended up and where I'm at now. It's like, yes, I love me teaching band to kids. That's cool, but that's not like all I'm about at this point. I think it just takes some growth to figure that part out, right? And then say like, okay, so now that I'm more than just this, is there a better way to provide for the family and provide for myself, and do so in a way that like isn't just kind of banging into my head the wall sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool, man.
So what was we talked about me, and let's talk more about me, but no. So what was that point for you? Like where along the lines did you have that realization that you needed to do something different?
So I think it was kind of this thing that like grew for a little bit, right? Like I think I was kind of thinking it for a while before I pulled the trigger. The biggest catalyst for it, of course, was COVID and having to teach during shutdowns and stuff, and just being like, well, you can't really do music through this, right? As much promise as the internet has given us, and as cool as this is, and as cool as this thing is, like we can't really do it the same way, right? And so I think that was just like, okay, this is going to be our new normal, whether we're ready for that or not. And I think I was kind of ready for new challenges anyway. And that certainly was like, yeah, okay, it's time to explore what else is out there. So for me, I started doing that UX thing because it was very, like, one of the first things that you just like type into Google these days, like what are good career switching things to check out and explore. And I toyed with a handful of options, and like real estate, of course, it almost seems like you can't not make money in that these days. But UX was really appealing because it had this creative element, it had this problem solving element. It seemed very people focused, and that appealed to me, right? Like all those things were things you and I are very much used to doing as teachers, right? Um, and yeah, even as I was getting going into it, like, oh, okay, cool. Like anytime we performed or got ready for concert, we're thinking about the end product and the audience that we're building this for, right? And so that is pretty much verbatim what UX is about. And so that was really appealing. I was like, I could do this. I know enough about how I'm going to build for that, that I can figure out the skill set and do the things I need to do to crack that and get there. And so yeah, so then I took a course all last year for it through SMU, and started doing some other projects and did some other kind of freelance stuff since then. And it's been interesting, and it's a very deep subject. I think a lot like music, a lot like education. You can just kind of keep digging and keep finding new things and areas and avenues to explore. So I think that's also part of the appeal. You know what I mean? It's like something I could study and get better at for as long as I care to, right? And I think that's also kind of cool too. But so yeah, so that's enough about me. Let's keep talking about you. Yeah, but so yeah, so that's what I'm up to these days, and so far it's been very fun kind of set of challenges.
Yeah. What do you feel like separates you from other people that are in your design field and or UX design?
Yeah,
Coming from teaching and from music, like what do you think?
Yeah, it's weird how many people I've met that are super uncomfortable being in front of other people. Have you, like, I don't know if you've experienced the same kind of thing, but like, even just in our classroom kind of settings of like presenting in front of the 30 other people in our cohort on Zoom, like people I was working with would kind of struggle with presenting. And it's like, oh, okay, like this is a skill set that I've been practicing since 14 or whatever, right? Just being in front of people and putting yourself out there. And it is very much a skill, right? It's very much a practice thing. And I certainly remember, recital classes back in the day that I struggled to get up there and put yourself in, but you get better at it and you figure out what you need to do to prepare to feel confident in that. And then even if you didn't practice enough, how to kind of fake the confidence enough to kind of get through it and, take your next practice session and get better. Right. And so I think that kind of element is big, because a lot of UX is like, okay, having discussions with not only your end users, but also all of your stakeholders and product people about like, what is it we're trying to do? And then also advocating for your users a lot of the time, saying, no, like this is going to be an expensive option, but it is absolutely going to pay for itself, and having that kind of like confidence to stand up there and say that. So that's I think is a big part of it. I think that's helped me along the way, to not have to relearn that kind of skill set or whatever, figure that out in addition to all the other hard skills that this requires. So that's been a big part of it, I think, so far for me to kind of figure it out.
You mentioned the presenting and doing projects in front of people, and I was curious because I'm new to UX design, and I kind of have an idea just because I dabble with like front end and back end stuff, and starting to learn how to do coding on my own for fun, just because I think it's a good skill set to have. But do you have any examples that you can share with us of some projects maybe you worked on, or whatever you'd like to share? So
absolutely. So I got my let's see if I'll pull this up over here. So here is our little this is my portfolio and one of our projects that we actually worked on back in the class. So this is kind of a collaborative thing, but this is our little adoption app for all of your kittens and puppies. And so what we ended up creating was this app we called AdoptSpot, and it's as real up into the point of actually getting released to the App Store or whatever, right? We hadn't actually gotten that far, but everything else was fine. And so really what it started with was like kind of telling this story and figuring out who this is going to get used for, and then what their needs are, and kind of meeting that. So like, even though at the end of all of it, it looks like this fully functional app or whatever, it really starts with like figuring out research goals first, right? And so you have to do like what is it you're trying to figure out about your users? What do they need and what is important to them? And how do you best solve their problems, right? So there's a lot of conducting this research, and we had like some empathy mapping where we're trying to get into the head of our users, and we did that through the research kind of thing. It wasn't just this abstraction. It was like really talking to people. And as we go through, we also compare to what else is out there in the actual market. And at the end of this, we kind of come up with these insight lists of like, here's the things that are going to make us different and make us valuable. And it's valuable because it meets these needs. And so you kind of like do this thing before you ever start sketching anything else. And then you figure out, okay, if I'm trying to adopt that, and ultimately this is where I pick up Buddy, like, how do I start that? I got to start here. This is what I have to do this login thing. If I need to set up a profile, I need to do this. To actually search, I need to do these things. And from here, we figure out like, okay, all of these are different screens and different elements and different things that need to happen for this flow to be successful and happy path, right? Mm-hmm. And so from there, like we kind of design out some stuff. And so like this little image kind of shows you like what our initial things were just like placeholder images and kind of setting up some basic things, and how that eventually turned into our designs at the end, you know, these little hero kind of images of just blocks and, you know, kind of some lorem ipsum stuff, and how that turns into a final profile for a user and for their pets and all this kind of stuff. And it, you know, starts with these kind of sketches that we have of just like, okay, maybe something sort of like this, and you do 87 different sketches, and then it turns into these what we call wireframes that go from there and kind of sketch out this. And this is really easy then, because you're adjusting stuff on the fly and constantly and bringing this to other people and saying, hey, what did you think about this? What did you think about this? Yada, yada. And that's great. And you come up with like some visual elements somewhere along the way of like, okay, this is going to be our visual language. Here's what we're inspired by. And so you do all that before you ever get into actually designing the final product, which you then have to test a lot. And then we had a lot of comments and critiques from our people that led us to do some other changes. You know, just some stuff that like we expected this and it wasn't quite where we thought it would be. It's like, okay, cool, we got you. We can change these kind of things. And so at the end, you have this kind of finished product, but it's really a lot about starting with that research and starting with that very low level fidelity of like, what might that look like and how might we solve it? Yeah. So that's kind of like for a product app centered design, that's what it would look like. But you can do a similar thing with website or with services, and that might connect in a bunch of different ways. Like one of our professors at SMU had worked with American Airlines for their like check-in kiosk, right? There's like little pads you get there at the airport, right? And so her big like claim to fame was mixing that process from 7 minutes on average to 2 minutes on average per person, which sounds so crazy that they spent like thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars to get that 5 minutes, but like how much better is that for the average person,
now
right?
that you bring that up, it makes a lot of sense, because we use American, like we're card holders with them, and so I remember at a time, I don't know how
link to American card holder right here, yeah.
Hey, yeah. I don't know how recent that update was made, but I do feel like a few years ago, probably like 4 or 5 years ago, that process I remember being a little more in depth, and you have to go through and like type in everything. And now when you go there, it's like you just scan your ticket on your phone or your passport or ID, and it's like maybe a 3 or 4 step process, and it spits you out and you're good.
Yeah, and so to get there, right, like how much research they have to do and how many screens between like your phone and the one at the airport and like the bag agents, like her screen as well, like all of those that get designed and those handoffs how to get designed, right? So it can be something as complex as that, or as simple relatively as this pet adoption app, you know what I mean? And anything in between. And so that's what's kind of cool about it, is it's like, yeah, there's just infinite depth to it, you know what I mean? Pretty
absolutely.
Much. Yeah. So yeah, it's really cool, engaging kind of thing. I'm having a ball with it so far.
Yeah, it looks neat. It looks like it definitely scratches the itch of the creative side. One thing in particular was the mood boards, because that's not something that I often think about, because with what I'm doing, it's very different. Like, I'm not worried so much about mood, or like I'm more of taking like the finished product and engineering, you know, copy or content or words or sentences, phrases, taking images and videos that are going to capture people's attention immediately. And then can can I make it easy for them to make a decision of I want to learn more about this, and then take
And
them to that your site to your site.
right, and so that's it. But even that content and that copy is part of that element, right? And whether you want to call it UX or you want to call it marketing, there's a little bit of an
Yeah,
overlap there,
yeah,
right? And I think that's also kind of the beauty of it, right? Too, like there's a couple different disciplines that get brought in here, but all ultimately for whatever purpose, right? To
yeah,
help the users figure out that yes, I do want to buy more of that jeweler's shop or whatever, right?
yeah.
So
How long
yeah,
did that course take you to complete?
that was like a 1 year course or what academic years. I think it was like September to April or May, something about like that.
Was it at
Um,
your own pace, or were there times that you had to meet? How did that work?
this one was like a live course. So like we had class like every Tuesday night, I think, something like that, Tuesday or Thursday, and met with kind of live over Zoom or whatever. Um, and like there are, I think, 87,000 different options currently for UX, right? Like I'm sure there are for marketing and everything else, right? There's so many people that are looking for the career switch, and so many tools on the internet have made that easy to take these kind of courses. But the live kind of thing with like people sort of in this area that I can kind of network with, I was really happy to have, and was pretty valuable for me. But yeah, there's a billion things out there.
Yeah, that's awesome, man.
Yeah.
Um, moving along, let's see what we got here. Um, so let's see. Can you talk about like the transition from from teaching to UX? What experiences did you draw from to implement? Like, what are some things you mentioned? The, obviously presentation and working with people is something that you've been practicing for a long time. What other skill sets have you noticed have started to apply to what you're doing now?
A big one they also talk about is empathy, right? So like, you and I both know that like the best lesson plan somehow sometimes just has to get tossed out the window because somebody is like not about that day, or you need to be able to adjust to meet the needs of the students that are in front of you that day. Um, and I think that's very similar in some aspects. Like, you could kind of sketch out this plan of what you think this is going to go, and then once you start meeting with your users, it is 100% about like figuring out what they need, and knowing that and empathizing with where they're at and some of their frustrations. And sometimes those are small things like, oh, this check-in kiosk at American is taking 7 minutes. Like, ugh. But, sometimes it's like, okay, I am a single mom with 3 kids in tow, and it's 6 a.m. and everybody is already miserable. And like this experience legitimately sucks. And I'm trying to do this one-handed while holding a baby and my luggage. Like that is a stressful scenario, right? And so on the one hand, you can kind of almost be dismissive of like 7 minutes, okay, whatever. But like when you really start to analyze like a person's actual situation and what they might be going through, and kind of having that empathetic sense of like, no, this is an important issue that is worth fighting for and worth
Yeah.
resolving. You know what I mean? And so, sometimes it can be like that. Sometimes it can be some other issue that comes up. But in either case, that empathetic kind of aim is what I think is really valuable as well. And yeah, of course, how many of your finest moments as a teacher were nothing to do with teaching paradiddles, and how much we're just
Oh
making that
yeah.
connection, right? You know what I mean?
Yeah. And you don't even like hear. I don't even hear about that stuff until you know students have come and gone. Like they're
Yeah.
way past graduation, and it's like that. I think that's one of the frustrating things. Um, and it's not like instant. It's not the struggle of instant gratification. It's you put this work in and you want to see. Um, obviously, you want to see results, but you also want to see the impact that you're having and get validation verbally. At least for me, like that was a big thing. I want to see like verbally or visually like that there's a true impact that I'm making. And I think that's kind of why I've been really happy with what I'm doing now, because I can see that stuff right away. And it seems like I could make a bigger difference on a larger scale, if that
Mm-hmm.
makes sense. And it's across different industries. So I guess that's probably one thing that I've kind of seen as a transition from teaching to what I'm doing now is, when I was teaching what does that recognition look like, and are you fairly compensated for that, that work input versus the output and what you
Yeah.
see out of it. And that was a huge transformation into what I'm doing now, where I see the worth in what I'm able to give people and bring value to their business and what they could do. But I could also see the results, and when people I'm working with, clients are really happy, and obviously dollars and cents are important, but you can see the growth of their business or the growth of their message or the growth of their plans, their dreams, what they want to do. To me, that was really enjoyable, and it still is. Like, I like to do stuff behind the scenes uh, for big projects, and to kind of watch it. And sitting in the back row of the movie theater, it's like being the director of a movie, and you just sneak into maybe the third or fourth weekend that the movie's been at the box office, and you just sit in the very back and pretend like you're a nobody, and you just kind of
Yeah.
watch it, and then you just see people's reactions in the audience. And to me, that's really magical, because it's just like, yeah, I did that. I put this together.
Yeah. You did that, right?
I made all these people have feelings and emotions, and that's really cool.
Yeah. Because there is certainly that degree of abstraction, if you will, in teaching, right? Where like you can see that growth on the macro scale, right? Between a sixth grader and that kid as a senior graduating or whatever, you can absolutely see that scale. But in the day to day, it's you don't often get that kind of validation, that kind of recognition. Um, and yeah, it is always just kind of surprising and a hard, I think, very hard to see that, especially in a tangible way,
Yeah.
like
And
that.
that's, yeah,
Yeah.
and I was gonna say, like, with what I do, it's oftentimes people ask me what I do, and it's hard to like show them anything. I mean, I know with yours, you see, like, we can see your mood boards and how you create, an app or the front end, and what all that stuff looks like. But anytime I have to like explain what I do, I have to show them, like, here, I can share it with you real quick.
Yeah.
Um, I have to share or show them, like, okay, we have like this interface that talks about like our audience that we're looking for in this one. Like, I've I've just decided to pick Austin and Fredericksburg, and um, as a good example, like, let's say that we're trying to target people that really like um, those Yeti cups that you can purchase, right? Right?
Yeah.
Those
Sure.
things are awesome. People love them. Okay, so then I have to think, like, if you're a business that's selling custom Yeti cups for your business, right? Maybe you work at some small like mom and pop style hunting and outdoor sporting gear store, right?
Hmm.
This is perfect for that, because you're not going to be able to really compete with Bass Pro Shop and Academy and Dick's Sporting Good. um, so we go in, and, like, this is where, like, the creative side is with what I do. Is I have to also think, you kind of mentioned empathetic, like, I have to think of the types of people that would be going to a store like this, and what they would want to see, or what we would want to show them, and who would be interested in this product. And like, just for example, let's say ages 25 to 65 plus. Well, I mean, age is a big thing. Like, when you're
Hmm.
trying to think about your target audience, right? If you're selling Yeti cups, to me, I'm thinking, people who can afford to have a truck, who can afford time to go hunting, who can afford time to go fishing, right? Who can move around big, heavy coolers, right? Maybe they like the outdoors with cooking. Okay. Um, if you're looking at high school kids, like 18 years old, it's probably not going to happen unless they're, like, with their parents or something. So for
Sure.
me, it's
Yeah.
like maybe age 25 might be a good year, because they may be a couple years removed from college, or maybe they're in college where they might be into buying a lot of the pro fishing gear, and wearing all those windbreakers and shirts and stuff like that. Then I have to think about, like, gender. Like, I could go, if I wanted to, I could pick what I want with that, just having to keep it in mind. So then it's like, okay, let's just stick with men. Let's just go with that, see what that's like. And then we can go in and type in the sorts of interests. Okay, I've already picked out a few. Like, maybe these are people that they like Coors Light, they like deer hunting, they like Whataburger. I mean, that's an easy one to me. Like I've
Yeah.
seen so many Yeti cups that have like Whataburger logos on them. Maybe they like Yeti coolers. Maybe their income level is like somewhere around, like, let's see, I'm gonna say top 10 to 25% of income earners, right? And then let's go with maybe they like luxury real estate.
Yeah.
And you can just go in, and so I have to like think about all this stuff as I'm putting things together, and as I start to do that, like the numbers of my estimated audience start showing up here, and then it kind of gives me like, based on a 7-day window, here's how many people we're going to reach, roughly how many conversions you could expect from that. Then it gets more detailed into where I want to place this stuff, and that's placement in terms of where on Facebook, because there's different algorithms that will take it to Facebook Stories, Marketplace, in-stream or in-stream videos, Reels, newsfeed, mobile newsfeed, and then also
Yeah.
all the Instagram accounts where you can get into the same stuff. So then you have to go into all that. So every industry is different, and when I have to explain to people like what I do, it's oftentimes really different because you don't, it's like more of the back end stuff.
Sure.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
once you get through all of this stuff, then you do finally get to, well, here's what the ad would actually look like if it's out there and you're getting hit with it. And this one, I was at the time working with someone that's like, they had a caregiving service, and so we were like creating up mock-ups of what it might look like. And
Hmm.
so we have to go through that, and then we talk about like the copy of it, and then how that stuff would look, and who our audience is, and how we can get them through the door.
Yeah, that's interesting because it's kind of funny too to see you like put in all these things and like you start with this audience of 1 million people, but how many are really invested in that thing, and if you kind of narrow that scope, you can kind of refine that content and that imagery and that kind of messaging that you're putting out there, and connect better. And it's kind of funny too because like as I scroll through Instagram, how many dozens and dozens of ads do I see every time I go through the stories or whatever, right? And I think that sometimes it's almost automatic. You just kind of almost tune it out, but obviously it has an impact. Obviously, like I've
Yeah.
bought stuff through those ads, like who hasn't at this point,
Oh
right?
yeah. Yeah.
And so I think they're kind of describing that like minutia to people of like, yeah, those ads that you click on to go buy, whatever Yeti coolers, like, yeah, here's what goes into that, right?
Yeah. So it's neat. A lot of people are scared by it for various reasons, but
Sure.
and all of it's with AI bots. I mean, they're listening for key phrases, key words, and that's a whole other thing too. Where like I'll specialize. Like Facebook ads was what I started with, and it's now one aspect of what I do. Like I'll do Google advertising as well, and help with
Hmm.
YouTube ads, and then there's also email marketing, the way that works, which is really hard. Text messaging is kind of the way to go. That's been a good one for
Yeah.
products. TikTok has been really great too. It just depends on what your audience is and
Sure.
what your industry is. So there's a lot that goes into that, and then there's also connecting the wiring of how you when you touch an ad and then you get to the website. Well, now we have to make sure the website's set up correctly so that you have code that will pick up and trace where that customer came from or where that lead came from.
Hmm.
And that's important for me because I can then create separate ads that kind of push them a little bit more along the funnel of, hey, like we noticed you checked this thing out. Are you sure? Like we're going to offer you an extra percentage off if
Yeah.
you want to join, right? So like then you have to start thinking in terms of that. And that's super helpful when it comes to bigger ticket items like real estate or,
Hmm.
uh, you know, uh, business courses or even coding courses or
Yeah.
UX design courses, right? So
Yeah, like I know I found that SMU thing through some ad somewhere,
yeah,
right? Like I
yeah.
know I've got that crap. Which
So
ironically enough, they still email me about if I want to sign up for another one, which I feel like that's like you guys know I did whatever. It's fine.
yeah, but that's again that
Yeah.
retargeting, and
Yeah.
at some point it'll eventually be like, here's the deal. And like
Yeah.
for me, being on that end, it's made me more mindful of my purchases that I make and having more intention behind them and waiting and
Hmm.
waiting and waiting, because I know at some point it's like that price will drop where I want it to be, and I'm like, okay, I can do that
Yeah.
thing. I know I'll invest in that.
Now I can finally buy those kicks I've been eyeing for a while. Yeah.
Yeah,
Or whatever.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, with that being said, that's essentially what I do, and it's not been an easy journey. I mean, that's for sure, and I would imagine yours was probably just as difficult to kind of move out from teaching and transitioning into this. Like the
Yeah,
actual process itself is a grind, I would imagine for you,
sure.
just as it was for me.
I think it's two sided because it's definitely learning the new field, and like you're going back to that 18-year-old self that doesn't know how to stand and play a recital, and you don't know all the skill set, and you're trying to figure this out while other people around you already know more or whatever, and so you kind of find yourself preparing. So that element is hard, but I think it's also for me at least, and maybe you can speak to this too. It was kind of hard to like convince myself that leaving teaching was the correct call because there's so much like wrapped up in this, like, oh, this is what I was supposed to do. Like, what would my
Yeah,
18-year-old self say? Like meant to do this thing. I have such an impact on students, which is all true, right? But at
hmm
a certain point, you just kind of had to say like, no, but I'm not happy currently. You know what I mean? And
yeah,
kind of convince yourself of that. Did you have
yeah,
something similar?
yeah. I think it was it's a very toxic way of, well, it's just a toxic environment.
Yeah.
You know, one of the struggles I had was ever since I had gotten into teaching, uh, I would seek from mentors like, why is it getting so tough? Like, why is this harder? And they're like, oh no, your first year is always the hardest. Okay. All right. Second year had a hurricane hit in Houston. Okay.
Yeah.
And then like halfway in, or I mean, my third year, it was like we were having issues with the program financially. And then the next year it was, um, halfway through the year it was COVID. And then like my
Hmm.
final year it was COVID. And it's like things were not getting easier. Things were not getting better. And at that point, it's like, even if I came out on the other side and I still was teaching, um, would I be happier and would I be prepared to take on another 25 years of doing this and get locked into this?
Yeah.
And that became a huge struggle for me was, do I want to be, in my 40s or 50s still teaching how the E's and the U's work in a rhythm to sixth
Uh,
graders?
it's T's and Taw's
Oh,
for the
that's
rest.
right.
Yeah. Sorry,
Oh,
sorry, sir.
yes.
Yeah.
We can talk
T's.
about that here. It's a safe
Yeah.
space.
It's the same.
But
Yeah.
oh man, that drove me crazy.
Yeah.
But anyways,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, that's in the past, but that was one thing that I had to really think about.
Yeah.
And having people telling me that like it does get easier and you have a lot of potential, and I'm like, of course, like that's it's all fine and dandy, but it just did not feel right to me, and it kept
Yeah.
getting worse, and the environment kept getting worse, and the demand and the workload, and for percussion, I think in particular, has morphed, and it's the thing that
Yeah.
everybody knows, but nobody wants to do a damn thing about is how percussionist has 4 or 5 different bosses, and
Yeah.
there's so many things to keep up with, and
And it's impossible to do all of it well.
yeah, and
Right.
you
It's
can't.
just impossible.
Yeah, and even
Yeah.
if you had a team of people you could hire, it's not going to
Yeah.
be the same. But anyways,
Yeah.
yeah. So we're on the other side, and it's okay now. And
Yeah.
I guess one thing that I would like to extend to people is like, obviously there are people in our fields that we're in now that know more than us, and that's great, that's awesome, like we're still learning, we're still growing, but I think that by having this conversation makes it a little easier for teachers that are on the fence about wanting to continue in their field or wanting to change, and what that might look like, and if it's difficult, and like, I mean, we're here, we survived, we're okay, we did it.
Yeah.
I mean, there's still, I still have nightmares. It's okay. You're always going to have nightmares. You're always going to question what you're doing.
Sure. Yeah.
But to me, the risk reward, like, uh, man, I can't tell you. Like, it's just so much has been lifted off of my
Yeah.
shoulders. Like
Yeah.
now that I'm doing my stuff on my own, and um, I would encourage people to reach out to either one of us. And I mean, if you have a place that people can find you, what are like your handles, your tags, your email,
Yeah,
all that stuff?
I'm easy. I'm evangdabbs at everything. So
Okay,
yeah, mine's super simple.
sweet.
Website, email, whatever, LinkedIn profile. Yeah. But yeah, absolutely. I think that's part of it too, is like, having that discussion and saying like to anybody else, because you can do it either way, right? You can be a teacher and do any of these on the side. If you just need another release and another outlet, you can make the whole transition happen and just find a new thing to do, or
Yeah,
have your dog bark at whoever. Yeah,
that's always the challenge with these. My dog's upstairs and he's still barking.
I might have to sign language my way out of this last part of it.
Oh, that's fine. I think it's a good time to wrap up, anyways. But yeah,
But
man.
yeah,
Well, I'm glad you took the time, and hopefully more people will see this and feel encouraged to reach out,
yeah,
and definitely hire Evan, because I mean he's an arts guy, creative guy, and he's got the technical facility. So I'm sure any projects you have coming up, he's a good person to be in contact with.
I'll try, man. I'm trying. Yeah,
Yeah.
and talk to Joe. His link is right here
It's
for all
there,
the
one of
stuff.
these places.
Yeah, one of these corners somewhere, right? But yeah, it is fascinating what all is out there, and there's more than a lot of folks think. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And you can,
Well, anyway, thanks for organizing this. This is so good, and we got to talk more later.
yeah, for sure. Alrighty.
So all
See
right,
ya.
take care. Yeah, have a good afternoon, evening,
You too.
whatever we're in. Yeah.